Welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk. This week, Kris and I are going to dig into the API, the Application Programming Interface, the changes that are coming with 2510, and why it matters to you, even if you don't think you're a developer. It's going to be really interesting. We've also got a bunch of viewer questions here, from talking about bring your own device enterprise licensing to how to get metadata onto SSDs for faster media browsing. All this and more coming up next. So let's talk about this versioned API, Kris. Like, we've heard about this, a little bit before, quietly gaining traction in the background that maybe TrueNAS users don't think about very often is the application programming interface, or the API. So how about a little bit of a refresher here? Like, maybe I'm not a developer. So say, why do I care about the API at all?
So this is an interesting topic, because this is just kind of where I live here with the engineers. And so we talk about this all day, and then we talk about it assuming everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. So this is a chance to maybe go back and say, no, let's bring other folks kind of into the fold here so they understand what we mean when we talk about the API and why that's important and how it matters to you as a non-developer potentially. So for those who don't really understand, so TrueNAS, everything is API driven. So what does that mean? Well, it means everything you do through the user interface, the web interface, through your browser, all those things are controlling different APIs on the back end. There's a layer of software we have in TrueNAS that we call the middleware. Maybe you've seen this. You've seen middleware processes running if you've ever kind of poked underneath the hood and run htop or top. So what is a middleware, though? Well, the middleware is the thing that does all the business logic of TrueNAS. It's the persistent thing that's running when your web browser is closed and you're not connected to your TrueNAS. And it is all the magic, essentially, right? It's the thing that has all the mechanisms for controlling your pool, setting up ZFS. It's actively running constantly. It's monitoring things. It's the thing running smart tests in the background. It's the thing checking for temperatures. It's the thing looking for updates, et cetera, et cetera. It does everything, essentially. There's no magic or tricks in the UI in the sense of, like, it's not SSHing in and just running Unixy or Linuxy command things in the background. No, there's an actual, like, smart brain, if you will, that sits. And this is what makes TrueNAS more of an appliance versus, say, I just downloaded some random Linux distro and I'm setting everything up by hand and I'm mucking with things in Etsy. No, we're not mucking with things in Etsy. The middleware is the exclusive owner of all those things. It's the thing that determines when I need to rewrite a config, what that config looks like, how do I need to restart the service. It has all the smarts baked into it to say, oh, they want to change this config option. It knows, well, sometimes you can do that without restarting the service and disrupting clients. Other times it says, no, I need to go kick that in the back end, and it does all the Linuxy things to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So
the middleware rules,
refresher.
Yeah, the middleware rules apply to everybody in a sense. Like the WebUI has to go through the middleware to push the correct buttons in ZFS. Ideally, if people are running from the TrueNAS command line or an external script, they're calling the middleware to push those same buttons, update that same DB, and control the same actions on the back end. So that way you don't have anything that sort of jumps outside of it. But I mean, we've always had an API sort of for a long time. This isn't something that's brand new with, like, TrueNAS Scale or TrueNAS whatever version. So, I mean, tell us a little about the history here. Like, we've had an API, so why are we making such a big deal about it now?
So maybe, I guess we could go back earlier. If people have been around a while, you remember the old Django interface before we got this kind of shiny Angular interface about 7-8 years ago. There was a very minimal REST API in those days, but the UI did a lot of cheating in those days. It wasn't fully API driven. That was one of the reasons for wanting to move to an Angular, everything's an API call kind of web interface, because that API is what keeps all of us consumers honest, whether that be us with our own web interface or even third-party tools or plugins or things calling into the system. They all basically have to go through that same layer, and it's doing all the coordination between the different clients, if you will. We'll consider the WebUI a client in this case, right? Or a plugin or your script you're running. It's the thing making sure that everybody's behaving themselves and doing things the correct way and not shooting their foot off. It also is the piece that keeps all the important state. That's how you can download a config file for TrueNAS with all your configuration in it, reinstall, upload the config, and be back in business, right? Because all that state is all kept in one location. But what happened was about 7 years ago, we switched to this whole everything's API driven, which was a great step. But what made it really interesting in the last, we'll say, year or so has been this idea of having a versioned API. So historically, again, we'll go back a couple years ago. Yes, everything was API driven, but it wasn't necessarily versioned. So what does that mean? That means every 6 months we're putting out a new version of TrueNAS, and the API changed. And it changed due to a whole bunch of reasons. We're putting a new feature in, or the UI, we want to expose some new knob, or we want to tweak some behavior. So the API was constantly changing and shifting. Not every API call changed, but enough. Enough that if you were somebody using the API, writing plugins or scripts, it was kind of this constant back and forth where you had to check every 6 months, do my API calls still work? Do I need to go change them? Oh, they changed the behavior. It's subtly different now. It doesn't do the same thing. I mean, it worked. It was fine when we're the only user interface because we can kind of control both sides of the equation. But as soon as you have third parties who like have to pay attention to that and keep track with what we're doing, it's tough. So
yeah,
go ahead.
It makes it a little bit more of a high maintenance exercise. If you're on the outside, if you're somebody trying to build scripts to make, hey, I want to make TrueNAS do something different that maybe is a little bit outside of what we ship in the box. You're saying, I want to make it do this thing, or I have my own particular piece of software, whether it's, a virtualization stack or, containerization. And I want to be able to just tell somebody else to push the right buttons on TrueNAS. It made it pretty high maintenance because it kind of required that third-party developer to say, hey, there's a, like 2510 is coming out. Well, I better jump on the beta right away and start testing to make sure none of my API calls broke in it. But now we've made this significant change with the versioned API, Chris. So
that's right. So versioning is just a better contract between us, the kind of the API provider, and you, the client, the consumer. It basically means when we version an API call, it's going to be locked so that the behavior stays the same, the inputs and outputs stay, the same. We can't make breaking changes to you in the middle of a version. So if you're calling a specific version of this API call, it's going to behaviorally stay the same until eventually we decide to retire it and replace it with a new API call, which is a lot less frequent. It means you have a much longer window of, okay, I'm writing a plugin. Cool. I'm going to use that API call and it may stay there for years. And if we do decide on our end to deprecate it, there's like a 12-month or more cooldown period where you get warning and heads up to say, I do use that one API call. Ooh, they have a new version of it that I can call instead. I have time. It's not oh crap, a release just dropped every 6 months and now I got to go and figure out what's changed. The version being changed is an important indicator of, I'm going to have to go look at my script or my plugin and adapt the new thing. But again, it's a lot less guesswork now. It's easy to know and audit and figure out okay, what's changed with this release? Nothing I care about? Great. Wonderful. Move on. Plugin's fine.
Exactly. And we're trying to give you a lot more notice on this. Like if you look at our website where the documentation is, which is api.truenas.com, you'll see there's already the formation of the API docs for 2604. And 2510 hasn't even officially left the line yet. So we're giving people lots of advance notice. So if you have a plugin that you're writing externally now, and all of the APIs you're calling, you can sort of, grep through your code, take a list and say, what am I calling in TrueNAS? You can very quickly check against it in the new version and say, okay, hey, did anything change between these versions? Okay, something did, but it's not any of the calls I'm using. Great. My plugin is not only ready for 2510, my plugin's ready for 2604.
Yeah, and more importantly, if it doesn't work for some reason, that's on us. Now we have to go and explain or fix why the interface isn't working the way it should have. That's a way for us to test for regressions as well.
Exactly. And if it's an intentional change on our part, like, hey, we want to return an additional value or something like that, and you're not ready for that, say, okay, well, 2604 is out. I'm still calling version 2510 of the API, and we have a little bit of, backward compatibility built in there to say, hey, 2604, I'll still respond to a 25.10 API call. Maybe 26.10 might say, I can't respond to that one anymore. We got to move to the new version. You got to move to at least the 2604 revision. We're looking at that kind of how long do we keep the previous API calls active? And that's something we got to really take a lot of thinking about internally just to make sure that, much like with the software updates themselves, we want people to stay current as much as possible, but, we're not trying to force you to jump on something as soon as it shows up.
Now, let's zoom out here for a second, Chris, because I can already see some of our audience. Now, granted, a lot of you are technical, but some of you might be thinking, oh, well, that's great. I'm never going to write a plugin. I'm never going to do I'm not a software developer. I'm not going to interface with the API. That's not me. But I'd like to take a moment. Let's zoom out a little bit here and consider that. Now, granted, we do design our user interface and our whole user experience to be as broad as possible. So in a sense, we try and make sure that for every kind of mainstream setup, in other words, we try and target for like the 95% use cases, that we make sure there's always an easy way to do that via the UI. And, we're constantly improving it. Great. But I also know our typical audience here and on our socials, our forums, I see a lot of very, we'll say, tech savvy folks who are using TrueNAS, and they're constantly telling us, oh, I went to the command line to do this customization or this tinkering. And historically, we've always heavily discouraged folks from doing things at the shell prompt. Well, again, why? Because most of the operations you do at the shell prompt are outside of the purview of the middleware. They may not persist across upgrades since the middleware doesn't have any visibility into the changes you're kind of making behind its back, right? Or worse yet, we always get the fun, hey, I upgraded, everything broke, you suck, TrueNAS, what happened? And then we find out the person had been making changes at the command line. It's like, well, that's what happens. You're making changes kind of outside of all the safety belts and mechanisms designed to prevent you from breaking the system. So we want to avoid those kind of things, but we have this new versioned API, and only there was a way for people to use that a little more effectively. Have your cake and eat it too. This is where the API is so powerful. And I think in a sense, it's so rich that a lot of people don't even know how much functionality is there. They just don't go look at it because you just assume, oh, I'm not a developer. That's not for me. But I think that's not the case anymore. Now, remember, this is 2025, Chris, and a lot of stuff's changed in the last couple of years. A few years ago, I would have agreed with people making those comments like, yeah, I'm not a developer. I can barely write scripts. I'm just kind of a command line tinker.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right. The API is probably not for you.
Yeah, maybe you've done some Bash, you've done some PowerShell kind of things. Yep. You go, I'm a scripter. I'm not really a programmer. And an API, that P is for programming. It's not an application scripting interface, right? But
yeah,
we've had this little craze that Chris and I have talked about a little bit recently. Maybe you heard of it. It's called AI. Now, there's a big debate going on about, how good it is as, brand new wholesale, creating code and features from whole cloth. I think maybe, Chris, you got some opinions on that, but it's
I definitely do. I was going to say, I think it's better than most give it credit for, and it's only just going to keep getting better in the coming years. But the one thing that AI does really excel at today is API-driven development for exactly those kind of scripting scenarios. If you're somebody who was tempted to say, yeah, I do a little bash scripting, I know how to maybe call something with curl and do a REST call that I copied and pasted from somewhere else kind of thing, AI might be your best friend here. Because if you find you have some itch to scratch in the TrueNAS side, you want to automate some piece of it, you have this cool thing called AI, which can go and write the script or the tool or the program, be it a Python or Golang or whatever, and use our very rich and featureful API interface in a safe, consistent manner, which won't get you in trouble down the road when you go to upgrade or anything like that. It's kind of just there, right, for the plucking if you have very specific things you'd like to script or automate away. So how would you do this? It's actually not that bad. You can pick your favorite vibe coding platform of choice. There's a new one every week, it seems like at this point. But, you have your popular ones, your Windsurfs, your Cursors, your Claude Code, which is our preference. And you can put requests into just common English or even your native tongue. What is it you want to do? And then you pointed at our API documentation. Chris, you mentioned the website. And we'll have to we'll link it here, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to remember.
Over and over.
API.truenas.com, right?
Yeah,
and then from there, you just pick the version.
Exactly. And that's the thing is people say, well, maybe AI is not so good at, if you tell it, hey, I want to make a brand new mobile game for somebody's phone and I want to make $1 million and get rich. It's not going to be fantastic about that. Computers are really good at solving well-defined problems. And if you give it a problem and a well-defined set of tools to do it, like a very well-documented API, it's going to do a really, really good job. I've been playing with this quite a bit myself, and I'm pretty impressed with how easy it is to get something up for somebody who, maybe has some programming experience, but I'm pretty rusty. It's been quite a few years since I've done something more than, picking around with command line scripting and gotten into actual programming. So it's doing quite a good job for me.
This is where I think it excels. So again, if you're one of those guys who feels comfortable at the command line, who maybe felt like it's too hard to go do programming, I don't really feel comfortable in Python or a Go or something, this might be the magic thing you needed. So for example, let's give you a real world scenario, Chris, of something I could see somebody doing, or heck, I might even do. Say I wanted to go have some behavior on my TrueNAS because I run a lot of apps. and I'm having to log in periodically and check for updates and click buttons and stuff, which is fine. That's what most people do. But maybe you want to go and automate it. Maybe you run a bunch of TrueNASs because you have more than one or more than two or more than 10, as we see happen occasionally. Maybe you want to go and script that all out. Okay, well, how I would do that today is I would start by pointing the AI over at the api.truenas.com documentation. Claude Code, for example, will go happily fetch it, pull it in, digest it. It would easily, quickly read about how the JSON RPC specification worked. And it might say, okay, to get started with this, we have to go establish a login. It'll notice that there's an auth.login API call to gain access to the middleware. Your AI would probably ask if you want to use a password, or it would notice that, oh, there's other login options to use API keys, which, yes, that's what you should do if you're going to do this. Don't hard code your password and things. Geez, come on.
No.
Still be smart about it.
It is 2025.
Yeah. But then from there, you would ask the AI, okay, what are my options for how I could manage apps? It would read the documentation and very quickly identify, wow, there's this app.query API call that exists that returns a whole list of all the applications installed on your system. And it would notice in the return parameters, there's a handy little bool, true or false, that indicates whether that app has updates available. Okay, well, that's cool. So meanwhile, your AI is going to go ahead and write your script or tool to go ahead and pull the list of apps, check that Boolean, and then you tell it, what do you want it to do with that? Well, I want it to update all the apps. Okay, well, then it'll call the next call, which goes in turn and updates each of the apps one by one. Or you could tell the AI, I want some more logic here. I want to update only Jellyfin, or only this set of apps. And the other ones, maybe just print out what they are and then let me go update them later or something, because I don't want them updated as often. Great. Again, this is where you're just creating your script the way you would if you sat down by hand and wrote something in Bash and did it all. But because the AI has access to all those API calls, and because you know the API calls are safe in the sense of that's the whole point of the middleware, is to make sure you're doing things right, it's going to be a lot harder to foot shoot yourself. So versus going and doing it the old way, which might be, well, I'm just going to go do random Docker commands at the command line and whatnot. Okay, that may work. It may not. You could also get into trouble if you're not careful. So all that to say, it's one of those things where I think a lot of folks are going to wake up to this in the coming years, where they're going to realize, wow, there's a lot I can do. Give me a good API and I can build anything I want. Heck, we've done it here. We use Jira pretty extensively internally, and sometimes it's easier to go build a little web app that sits in front of Jira and gives us the things we want in a view that we care about. It's much easier, right? And that's pretty much ripe for the asking as well, because there's a good API. And you just say, here's my API, pull these queries, visualize them this way, show me what work needs to be done, what's lagging behind the code freeze coming up, blah, blah, blah. That's pretty nice. So highly recommend folks consider that. Again, if you consider yourself kind of a Linuxy, Unixy admin already, you may want to put AI in your toolbox next as well for how can I drive around TrueNAS via the API and have it worry the details about the Python syntax, which you might be really rusty at, for example.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's a good sort of summary description of the version API there, Chris, and why it's so important, why we've been talking about it in the past, and why we're all excited about it over here.
Yeah. And again, as you find things where it's like, oh, I really wish there was an API call for that. Those are great feature requests to put on the forums, by the way. We do like to hear that kind of feedback. If there are API calls that are lacking in capability or don't exist, those are the things I would love to take a look at. So send the requests in.
Exactly. That's a great thing. That's a great point to bring up as well, Chris, and we'll link the feature request down in there below. We have been trying to do a lot of housekeeping in there, so feel free to go in there, check to see if there's anything interesting or intriguing to you. Give them some votes. You might have had a few more of them freed up recently because, like I said, we've been going through previous requests and trying to sort of update things on our roadmap and give you a little bit more updates and feedback going back and forth. But for now, speaking of updates, feedback, and back and forth, let's jump into a few viewer questions here. So do you want to sort of go over this first one here from TJ?
I'll read this out. So TJ says, hi, I'm new to TrueNAS and ZFS. Love it so far. Hey, great, TJ. Glad to hear that. Quickly went from a 2x4 terabyte low-end NAS to a nice home-built server now with a pool of 2 7-drive 18 terabyte RAID Z1 VDEVs. Nice. I have 190 terabytes of exclusively movies and TV shows, Linux ISOs. And with each movie and TV show season in its own folder, I know each file is an MKV, which I understand is some sort of container. So my question is, Would a special VDEV help a large media pool performance in any way? Wasn't sure if maybe it helps when browsing, etc. I've dug through the forums, haven't found a straight answer other than it obviously won't help improve sustained read-write speeds. As a Mac user, I'm also very excited to see Spotlight support in Half Moon. Thanks, TJ. All right, Chris, what do you think here? How much will it really help him?
Well, TJ, I'll give you the straight answer here. It may help you a little bit for browsing the folders through like Finder or something, but I'd expect that most of that metadata about the files should actually land in your primary ARC, so your main RAM, fairly quickly after that first initial directory browse. I know macOS behavior on directory browsing is typically slower than Windows or Linux. I believe usually that's because it's trying to query that container, the MKV itself, for its internal metadata like runtime, resolution, things that you would normally index in Spotlight. And as you pointed out, we're going to be able to index in Half Moon with our TrueSearch engine. Now, one of the alternatives to this, if you're looking for sort of faster media browsing, since you're talking about movies and TV shows that you, of course, have on your own system there, maybe using a media server app, whether it be Jellyfin or Plex on there, and if you put an SSD cache there, or not an SSD cache, but rather a dedicated pool, and store the Plex or Jellyfin's cache and catalog information on that SSD itself, that might be far more valuable, as that media server app is going to store any sort of downloaded or generated cover art, posters, chapter thumbnails. They're all going to land on those SSDs. That'll make it much faster to search and browse them, because the app will know I have my own little dedicated database. It's kind of like a micro version of TrueSearch there, where it says, I already know what you're looking for, and I've stored this on an SSD. It's quick. I know how to get to it. So here's your poster, here's your banner, here's your runtime, your rating, your IMDb's, your Rotten Tomatoes, all those things. By the way, I also know that here's the actors and actresses in there, and here's some possibly related ones. It'll come up in just like half a second. It's like, the We Have Netflix at Home, except it's actually good. So go ahead and check it out. So they're both available. If you look at apps.truenas.com, you could browse the catalog, take a look and compare, Plex versus MB versus Jellyfin. I'm obviously a big fan of Jellyfin. It's free, it's open source, and it doesn't sell your watching habits to a bunch of people like Plex does, which automatically makes it better. And if you disagree, feel free to fight me in the comments section below.
Well, it's exactly as you described, Chris. Their database they're doing is exactly what we're doing with TrueSearch. TrueSearch is obviously more generic and broad because it's for all file types, whereas this is very purpose-built for just your media and entertainment. So it's not going to go index your Word documents or PDFs. Like TrueSearch has to worry about all those other types. But yeah, go ahead, have fun, set it up. That is a very common use case. I'm sure if you're not, you should become a Jellyfin fan soon.
All right. Well, hey, let's dig into a couple of YouTube questions here that came in. So we got Zappa555, who says, file manager, yes. And he says, please make it a two-pane Norton Commander type one, please. If we remember Norton Commander back in the days, you had sort of the left and the right window, and you're able to drag and drop, send things. It was really good for the power user kind of type. What do you say, Chris?
So file manager, yes, obviously I've already spilled the beans on that. That's happening. It is not going to be two-pane though. Sorry, too old school for me. It is designed to work also on mobile phones where you have kind of one pane. Everything can long press to highlight and click and select, and then you can go navigate around and say, now I want to paste my files here. But that's a lot of real estate to throw away potentially, especially on smaller form factor devices. So it'll be single pane. But hey, I think you'll still be pleased to have it there. It's very darn useful.
Yeah, I think that'll be useful. Let's go for another one here. We got Got18. He says, you're adding so many nice features which take a lot of effort to implement them. Well, thank you. It's a lot of work here. But then the request of some users, such as for a higher timeout time for VM shutdown, was declined. This would be simply changing a number, extended sad emoji face. Well, with this one, I think I'll say, this one was declined as a one-off specifically, but it's because there's a larger roadmap for VM changes that's already being put in use internally. So we're going to have some more updates on that. I did see that one about the timeout for VM shutdown, the service order of VM shutdown if you're consuming like loopback resources over SMB or NFS. And I even saw somebody put in a request that talked about setting a startup order or sort of startup delays for those who have multiple systems that maybe rely on each other.
Well,
it's kind of like
boot orders as well. Like
exactly,
do it after this other one, or shut down after this other one kind of thing.
Exactly. Hey, boot up this system and then wait, 120 seconds for it to get up and be able to be ready to service things, and then boot up this next machine that depends on it. At that point, Chris, we're starting to really build like an enterprise hypervisor, and that's a pretty big product and project. That could take us a while to do.
So don't be disheartened that this one very targeted request was maybe was declined, because again, there's a bigger picture of things we want to do over time here and have plans to do. So we expect sometimes some of these one-offs don't make sense to do on their own, because we're anticipating some of that changing anyway, as far as like how the big scheme works and things work together. So again, don't be too disheartened. There's plenty of things we still have to do there.
But in terms of those one-off fixes, sometimes the answer is, you know what? Fine, I'll do it myself. And you can go ahead and submit a PR to us. And if it's something that we say, we have plans for this down the road, but maybe this works now and it fits in with our current sort of use case and code base, it's a pretty convincing argument to say, I've made this work. You just have to merge it. We'll typically review those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, next up we have from 2008 MJB. The Veeam VM appliance needs a demo done by TrueNAS to drum up possible business. I don't think people understand how amazing this can be for small to medium-sized businesses, especially the home labs, if they ever allow Veeam community licenses to be used with the new VM appliance. We agree. I think this is going to be a very interesting solution that we're going to see, especially on the small to medium-sized business side, maybe on the larger as well. This idea of running your entire Veeam stack, if you will, directly on the storage array, where it's got direct access native to the storage under the hood, so to speak. It's not traversing the network to get there. This is a good thing. So I expect we'll talk more about that in the future. Again, part of this is on the Veeam side. They have to fully release and realize this product, and whether they're going to allow community licenses or not, that's an argument you have to make with them. Obviously, we don't have a lot of say in that, but we are keeping an eye on this. We know our community wants it. We know our enterprise customers want it. It's a big one.
Exactly. All right, so the next one here, MsDurex says, is it possible to have a BYOD enterprise license? That would be amazing. So I know we've talked a couple times about certain features are sort of gatewayed behind that enterprise license requirement, whether it's, RDMA or things like that. So is that something that we're considering, Chris? I know we've been asked it in YouTube comments and other social medias, on our own forums. What do we think?
We get asked this all the time. So yeah, that is absolutely the plan here. As part of the TrueNAS Connect product, the plan is to eventually make some of these items available. So there is more of a bring your own device. And now I'd like to purchase certain enterprise functionality, which typically is restricted to our appliances. So that's definitely on the roadmap. It's still a little early. We haven't officially announced, dates those things will be available, but that is definitely the plan, because we've heard you. We've seen people say, yeah, I'm a little different. I use RDMA in a home lab situation, which again is rare. Not a lot of folks do that, but sometimes there's the possibility of, we could enable a license key for that, understanding there's different support levels as well that maybe aren't the same as with our own certified products.
Exactly. And some of those things that are sort of tied in with the validation of the hardware and some of the more complex stuff, like Chris says, we have to look at the roadmap. We have to see what's possible. And what we can talk about supporting, because obviously if we're doing like a sold enterprise license, it's got to be something that we can stand behind and support every aspect of it and say, hey, we're confident in this, that everything's going to continue to work. So some things may not be possible, some things will, and we'll look at what it is, because I know, like Chris says, there's a lot of you out there that are really pushing the boundaries between the home lab and the home data center. Those of you with your 40 gig RDMA capable switches at home, Leo, I see you in the Discord all the time. So this one's for you. All right.
No, we love our power users. You guys are awesome.
Exactly. All right. One more question here. Just sort of looks like semi-joke, semi-serious. Comes from thegorn. And he says, Connect sounds like a spyware backdoor. Hands off my data, you guys. Get your own Linux ISOs.
Oh gosh, I guess the jig is up. He figured it out. Jeez,
man, all of my Linux ISOs are publicly seeded, including the one on foztorrents.org. I don't know what he's talking about. I seed my own Linux ISOs quite happily. You're welcome to them.
Yeah. No, seriously though, this is actually a good one. I'm glad. I know you're probably semi-joking here, but at the same time, it's good to address this because you're probably not the first person who's said this or will say this in the future. And no, it's not a spyware backdoor. No, it's been purposely designed so that it cannot be used as such a thing. So remember, a lot of us who develop TrueNAS here, we also run our own TrueNASs. I have just as much desire as you would to go and expose my internal private TrueNAS to some public cloud service, which can go do those kind of nefarious spyware activities. So no, it's purposely architected and designed in such a way where we don't have visibility into your precious ISO collection because frankly, I don't want to know. I don't care. None of us do. So no. Rest easy. That's not a thing.
Absolutely. Well, hey, that was a good little summary there of questions, concerns, and discussion about our API. So that was a good episode, I think, today, Chris. So I know you're going to be...
This was fun.
I know you're going to be heading off to the OpenZFS Developer and User Summit very shortly. So for those of you who might be attending that one, feel free to sort of try to find Chris on the floor. I think we're sending you with some patches and some stickers and some little bits of TrueNAS swag.
Some buttons and stuff, some little swag. It'll be fun. It's a small conference. You won't have much trouble finding me. I mean, it's not a huge conference. But if you're there, come say hi. I would love to get a chance to talk to you. If you can't make it there, watch the videos on YouTube. I think they're going to live stream them. If they don't live, they will be up shortly after, as they usually are. And of course, when I'm back here the following week, I'll be happy to kind of give you a recap on what was discussed, what was exciting. Usually there's some cool kind of roadmap-y future stuff that ZFS is working on, which I'll be happy to come back and tell you all about. I'm looking forward to seeing what the speakers have for us this year. It's going to be good.
I remember watching the first video talking about things like persistent L2 arc and special VDEVs, and I was getting really excited about those, which kind of tells you just how much of a nerd I am. But we're all in good company here.
So we live for this kind of stuff. It's great.
Let's find all sorts of exciting new things to nerd out over on another episode. And with that said, that's going to wrap up our episode for today. So please continue to keep the questions and comments coming, whether it's in YouTube, on the forums, or through email at t3@truenas.com. Please continue to do the usual YouTube things for us. Keep the subscriptions coming. Ring the notification bell so that you get notified when we're back online and ready for your next episode. Chris and I will see you again next time.